What's up, you guys? Welcome to episode 462 of the Established Run NBA podcast. I'm Mike Gallagher here with Austin Yamada and Drew Dinkmeyer to talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder, the NBA champions, an impressive season. SGA with a lot of trophies this year, gets Finals MVP. Excited to break it down. We'll talk Kevin Durant trade. We finally had that big news come down as well. So pretty busy news with the trade. Desmond Bane also was interesting too. But yeah, the season's over. Austin, how's it going?
Yeah, good season. First season with ETR, a lot of fun, and yeah, we talked about earlier, really good playoffs with a lot of parity and a lot of just different faces from previous postseasons. So I thought it was, and we got a game seven, so not much to complain about there.
Yeah, two new finalists. It feels like every year we've got like a different finals. It's been quite a bit of parity. It's been pretty awesome. Dink, how are the playoffs for you, and how's it going?
Yeah, a difficult betting playoffs for me with all the parity compared to past years. So we'll have to adapt to that going forward in the future. Disappointing end to the series, which was such a great series. Obviously, with Tyrese having a major injury 7 minutes into the game after getting off to a hot start, 9 points in the first 7 minutes. Really disappointing kind of way that series ended because it's been so entertaining and the Pacers' run has been so entertaining. But on the whole, like it's great to see different franchises and different teams in the finals. We'll talk about a little bit about what we expect going forward, and if OKC can kind of break this curse that's been on champions, not being able to get past the second round the last 4 or 5 years. But it was a good season. I think the team that was the best team all season long ends up taking home the title, and it's a person who's in favor of rewarding great process. The Thunder have had the best process in the league in terms of building up this roster, and so happy for them, happy for their fans who are very passionate, very committed fan base. Sad for the Pacers fans who are also very committed, passionate fan base, a franchise that's never really tanked, never really hit the hard reset button and has always tried to compete. Sad that it went down the way that it did and what it does for the outlook of the future with Tyrese's Achilles injury. But in general, I thought it was a really solid season of NBA basketball, and the league continues with the infusion of foreign talent and the infusion of kind of more skill into the league. The game continues to really just be in a great place. So really enjoyed the basketball this year and look forward to next year, the basketball continuing to get better.
Yeah, definitely. We'll talk about the Tyrese Haliburton injury, which is really the big story of the night. As we'll look forward to how that shapes the East, which is totally crazy, and then the West got better too. Kevin Durant. Let's talk about that too. But we do want we want to talk Thunder first here. Crazy game. I mean, first half Indiana was up, and then the third quarter happens, and it's the classic OKC Thunder avalanche kind of third quarter. 7-0 edge on turnovers. That was really the whole game. That's OKC's bread and butter, turning the ball over. SGA was okay. And then also worth noting, too, their passing was way up. They had 272 passes in Game 7 after they were hanging around like 210. They actually outpassed the Pacers last night, 43 potential assists as well. SGA's classic point guard game from SGA. But yeah, Austin, what did you think of that third quarter? And then, they didn't die. The Indiana kept fighting through. But yeah, thoughts on how the Thunder were able to get this win.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty obvious to sing the praises of now two-time champ Alex Caruso. He started and closed that quarter. He only sat for like a 3-minute stretch there, so it was pretty much maximum Caruso, and it was this huge run. And I do believe the defense is contagious. Just him being out there, making everyone else more active. Like there's this belief when he starts deflecting passes, and he had 4 stocks this game, but also tons of deflections out of bounds and just like poking the ball away to make the guy reset their dribble, 5 feet behind the 3-point line. Like all of those things, there's this belief from the rest of the team, like we're the OKC Thunder and you're not going to score. You're not even going to get the ball in the paint. And that felt really infectious. And like Isaiah Hartenstein's a really good player, but Isaiah Hartenstein doesn't have that impact Alex Caruso does. And like I really have to give a lot of credit there that he spearheaded that run. We can ask Dagnall why he doesn't just start Caruso in the first half in of these last few games, but I thought he was clearly a focal point. And I usually am someone that kind of downplays like the importance of one player. Like this one player didn't do this or this, but like OKC doesn't win a championship without Alex Caruso. I feel pretty confident about that.
Yeah, we started the offseason, Dink and I remember doing the pod, and I was like blown away that they got Caruso that cheaply. So yeah, definitely that guy's just like such a classic winner there. But yeah, Dink, anybody if you want to add on Caruso, like I said, SGA didn't shoot the ball well at all, but still was able to distribute the basketball to his teammates, and they did miss. That was a pretty common thread too. The Thunder missed like a lot of 3-pointers throughout this whole playoffs and still won it here. But yeah, if you want to add anything on Caruso and anyone else that stood out to you, Chet was amazing as well.
Yeah, I thought, in the first half, it was really like SGA kind of holding up the entirety of the offense. Obviously, they got a few 3-pointers from Alex Caruso in the first half that also kind of helped stabilize things. But Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren weren't particularly effective in the first half offensively. J-Dub really started to, get back into the game in the third quarter, find a little bit of rhythm there. And then Chet's defense in the third and fourth quarters were very impactful, especially kind of the blocks that stopped the tide of some runs that Indiana was trying to kind of build momentum. From SGA's perspective, I thought in the first half he was really in rhythm and getting to his spots and finishing off with kind of the mid-range jumpers. In the second half, I thought he settled a little bit for 3-pointers. He ended up 2 for 12 from threes in this game on the whole, settling a little bit for the step backs. But the thing that I'll note about SGA is, from a point guard perspective, 12 assists, 1 turnover. OKC's an offense just had 7 turnovers in total. I think that was a big story of the game, was obviously like if they could protect the ball once Haliburton went down, they were going to limit the ways that Indiana could hurt them, right? As long as you protect the ball, Indiana's probably not going to, overwhelm you on the offensive boards. Indiana's, without Tyrese Haliburton, probably not going to overwhelm you with half-court execution. And we saw it in the third and fourth quarter where there was a 8-minute stretch in the game where the only person to score for Indiana was TJ McConnell. They had no other offense, and TJ McConnell was just creating his own YMCA mix reel in underhand layups and reverse layups and fadeaways and all these different things. And like that's offense that you will live with all the time if you're the OKC defense. So I think SGA was an exceptional decision maker in this game. I thought he did a really good job at getting the ball in the hands of his teammates and the ability to attack, as highlighted by the 12 assists. And I thought he did a great job protecting the ball. When they threw a lot of pressure, obviously they dialed down the full court pressure until the fourth quarter, and they went with kind of more of a half court pressure approach that they were effective with in Game 6. And I think OKC was just much better prepared for it this time out and took care of the ball in a way that, along with the Haliburton injury, really made it such an uphill battle for Indiana to be able to score enough to win a Game 7 on the road.
Yeah, the rim protection was really key, but yeah, McConnell is just inevitable, man. The guy just keeps coming there. But yeah, I think excuse me, I think Chet's defense was like something that really stood out to me. Really inconsistent playoffs, right? We saw him bad in Game 1, bad in Game 6, but excellent last night. I thought J-Dub was almost like the Pascal Siakam version, just kind of looked pretty steady overall. And yeah, I thought Lou Dort was pretty good, diving all over the court. Hit some shots late as well. But yeah, anybody else? I thought Kaysen had some big steals as well. But anybody else you wanted to kind of shout out Austin on this big win for them?
No, I think Caruso and Chet were really the backbone. Kaysen, he did pressure the ball, but I did feel like he was allowing penetration. Like he was getting blown by from TJ more than I'm used to. And he also was like kind of small, like not contesting those jumpers well. Yeah, nothing really to add. I think it's Caruso and Chet, really.
Yeah, and then I think the big talking point on all the national shows is SGA legacy, right? Like what, only 4 players I think it was have the scoring title, MVP, and NBA title. He has the Western Conference Finals MVP. I mean, he's got everything here. It's SGA, Shaq, Jordan, and Kareem, so pretty elite company there. Yeah, where does this do you have any SGA legacy thoughts, Dink? I know it's not usually our jam, but I definitely think it's worth talking about at least a little bit, because it's that's really elite company right there.
Yeah, it's certainly on the earlier stage of winning your first title at the age of 26. Usually it's starts to be like 28, 29 where guys start to get the breakthrough and over the hurdle. It's a different environment and era in general now with the new collective bargaining agreement that's going to make it more and more challenging for teams to have dynasties in the way that we saw in the 80s and 90s and even in the early 2000s, where you saw teams have 3, 4, 5-year runs where they could chase back-to-back titles, chase three-peats and different things like that. And we'll get to this when we're talking about the Pacers a little bit, but the windows for teams now tend to be a little bit shorter and a little bit tighter. OKC is unique in that regard, in the sense that if you look through, the top 10 players this year on their team in terms of like minutes played for the season, only one is above the age of 26, and that's Alex Caruso at age 30. Obviously super impactful and super important for their ability to win. And obviously the Western Conference is going to get better and better. Victor Wembanyama is going to continue to grow into his own. The Rockets acquiring Kevin Durant, which we'll talk about more as their young team kind of thrives. But this OKC team is really built with all the picks that they have in the holster, with the combination of the big three of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jalen Williams, and Chet Holmgren, and how they complement each other. They are really built, and with also their coaching and development, who has consistently gotten the best out of players. They are really built to make a potential multi-year run at this. And that's where I think ultimately like the legacy stuff on an individual player might start to shake out in a way that Shai might look different than all of his competitors in his era, right? And I don't think it means that Shai is a different caliber of player than Jokic or Tatum or some of these other great players that historically you're going to look at in the future and be like, oh, who was the player of that generation? But I think if OKC can end up putting together a run where they get to 3 or 4 titles, different things like that. Obviously, they're just at 1. They're not even at 2 yet. But if they can do that, he's going to look very different than the rest of the great players during his time, in a way that I don't think is fully representative of the skill gap between those great players, but more representative of the roster gap in terms of the build that OKC has been able to successfully put together with all these pieces kind of ascending in their prime. And I know during the game I was seeing, from, sort of some more casual NBA follows talking about like, oh, if OKC is unable to, win this, are we talking about unloading, Chet or Jalen Williams for Giannis and different things like that during the offseason? And I don't think we have to answer any of those questions now. I think you get to see these guys grow, and this was his age 22 season, J-Dub his age 23 season. It's hard to imagine, but these guys are going to continue to get better and better. And so the Thunder and SGA are in a unique position to challenge some of the conversations around legacy with this era of players because of how well this roster is built around him, in a way that I just don't think Jokic or like, Tatum had kind of this shorter window, with Porzingis when they added Porzingis, that I think is going to be a little bit different for SGA, because there's just nothing quite like this in terms of, all these talents kind of ascending at the same time and age-wise, and so many picks kind of to be able to keep, massaging the roster in whatever ways they need to. It's really a well-constructed team, and I think that's going to help in the conversations of legacy for SGA going forward.
Yeah, and just the picks, they still have the Clippers pick this draft. They've still got so much to get and so much draft capital to kind of help them maybe massage some corners of their roster to make sure they're not paying too much money, because they are going to have to pay a lot of money to this roster because it is that good there. But yeah, Austin, if you want to add anything on SGA, or where do we go from here? Should note, I was looking up MVP for next year. Joker the favorite plus 210, SGA right behind him plus 260, and then big gap to Giannis at plus 750, as well as Luka Doncic there. But yeah, anything you want to add on SGA and just this how good this roster is?
Yeah, I think I discussed this earlier. I think I'm a little low on Shai's offensive impact relative to other MVPs and other superstars, just because he, really decreases ball movement in a way that like Luka, like he'll only pass when he's doubled, and he holds the ball so much that even when he does pass, he's not giving as many passes, like team passes, team assists. I think I'm a little more down on that. And I think like his offense is very much, it's efficient, like field goal percentage wise, but it's a lot of twos and it's a lot of free throws. And like, when he's not making his shots at an efficient level, like in the playoffs, he's more of a floor raiser than he is a ceiling raiser. But where I wanted to give Shai flowers is on the defensive end. He's not just a good defender. I think he's one of the best superstar defenders there is. And the reason that like he would be attacked is A, to make him work because he is the superstar, and then B, because there's no one to attack on OKC. But I think that's what makes OKC's defense going forward so exciting, is like Shai is not only like he came into the league as a 6'6" point guard who was a defensive specialist, and will he ever develop enough offense? And like he gets so many steals, so many blocks, so many turnovers. He competes. He brings the effort. Like all of these things that I think are so integral for an elite defense when your superstar participates. And like we just look around the league and like a lot of these other superstars, like, you know, Jokic is a good team defender, but you can target him on defense, and you have Steph, and you have Lillard, and you have Luka, and you have list goes on. Harden, you know, Haliburton, Trae Young, like the list goes on and on of these one-way players. And you do really have, like, Atlanta has to compromise their defense and build a scheme around Trae Young, and like to have a defense like OKC's where your superstar is an asset is, I think, so valuable now and in the future. I don't want to spend too much time on OKC just because like their team is probably going to be largely the same as it was last year. Like we keep saying they're going to add Siakam, they're going to add Markkanen, and they keep passing on these players. At some point, you would think that Presti will kind of consolidate these picks, but they have Topic coming over. Like it's, I think it's going to be mostly growth from their young core and maybe add in one or two, but it's just really hard to predict what it's going to be next year. I will note that they got very fortunate with health, and you kind of have to win the NBA title. But like, granted, their team was really deep and built for injuries, but like they didn't really have a single injury to any of the rotation players in the entire playoff run. And like, not to take anything away from them, but that is really valuable. And until Game 7, and like Indiana also had incredible luck, and you need a combination of skill and luck to get to where you need to get to.
It's easier to be healthy though when everybody's 21 to 25 and the minutes are managed during the course of the regular season because you're blowing everybody out. Like that's one of the things that, you know, yes, there's luck, but there's some skill in terms of the wear and tear that was kind of put on these guys and the age that they all are. And, you know, as we transition to the Pacers, I do think it's interesting that one of the things that we've talked about with the Pacers for the last 2 playoff runs has been this voodoo magic of having sort of the best player on the opposing team seem to come up short in terms of health wise. And then all of a sudden at the last leg, the last stage, you know, final 3 games of the series, Tyrese Haliburton's calf starts acting up, and then in a absolutely disastrous way for Game 7 for them to lose their best player and kind of have to play uphill in that realm. And that was the thing, that the toll of all those playoff series going deep for Indiana, the toll of the second half of the season, and Tyrese Haliburton kind of having to, you know, keep playing deep in the season and not super elevated minutes compared to other stars around the league because Indiana likes to spread things around. But the toll, like the voodoo magic finally kind of struck back on Indiana in a really heartbreaking way with the Tyrese Haliburton Achilles injury.
Yeah, I'll just say that, you know, SGA was 35th in minutes, Jada was 60th in minutes per game. So I mean, they didn't play them a lot, but they did obviously play a lot of games. Shots at them, and yeah, just a beautifully constructed championship there. But yeah, like we said, the biggest takeaway from last night is Tyrese Haliburton is almost certainly going to miss all of next year with another Achilles. I mean, there's so many Achilles. We could do a whole pot on that. You know, the Pacers alone had 3. Don't forget Isaiah Jackson and James Wiseman tore their Achilles way earlier this year. But yeah, what does this look like? Like, how much Ben Mathurin are we drafting for best ball? Curious to see how, you know, what they do with their roster. Obviously, TJ McConnell is just out of this world. But yeah, where does Indiana go from here, from being, you know, one of the favorites, I would say, in the East to now, you know, not? You know, where does Indy go from here?
I think this is really a like a, you know, I don't want to say a positive development for Andrew Nembhard because his running mate just got injured, but like as far as his career goes, his career prospects go, it's definitely going to be good for Andrew Nembhard, who is like a little small for a 2 guard, but like he gets to move back to the 1 and still guard the point of attack. And he's been a true point guard for most of his career, and like especially before the pro days too. And being able to kind of like, he hasn't had that many reps as a lead guard against another lead unit in the NBA. And we see when Haliburton does miss games, like, you know, sometimes we'll see like a 7.5 assist line for Andrew Nembhard, especially in this type of offense and this type of like pace. Like we could see Andrew Nembhard being like a really fantasy friendly type asset that averages over 7 assists and just has the ball in his hands more, because he's not really a catch and shoot guy. It probably means more usage for Pascal Siakam. And then Indiana in general is just one of those teams where like they thrive off their depth. They don't play anyone huge minutes. So like, I think that they have a chance to get back to the playoffs next year, even without Tyrese. But it's the sad thing is like, even if he were healthy, it's kind of hard to imagine this run of like good play, historic comebacks, and injury luck again for the other team for Indiana to return to the finals. And then with the Haliburton injury, it kind of even puts more of a damper on like, if Haliburton comes back 2 years from now, will he be the same player? Will the pieces around him be as good? It's Indiana doesn't have a ton of like young stud assets that are like, you know, burgeoning superstars. Like Jarris Walker is a good asset, but it's really tough to see Indiana be back in the finals again in any meaningful time period.
Yeah, for sure. I always think of I call Andrew Nembhard weekend, like his rookie season. He went against Steph and Dame and like went off. McCollum was out for those 2 games. I definitely think we're going to see a lot of Nembhard there. I think Mathurin was fantastic last night too. Obviously TJ McConnell, but the board output really showed up there. But yeah, Dink, you know, where does Indiana kind of in like the quote unquote power rankings here, or anything you want to add just to what this roster is going to look like next year?
Yeah, I think prior to the Haliburton injury, you would have been talking, you know, kind of a clear top 3 until we see, you know, how Boston's offseason shakes out with Cleveland, Indiana, and New York in terms of the top 3 in the Eastern Conference. And I think Indiana slides out of that tier and kind of into more of a malaise of a tier where it's a little bit more confusing to figure out. You know, Detroit, Philadelphia, we'll see what they ultimately look like. If any of these other you know, younger kind of up and coming teams can kind of make moves to re-solidify their rosters. But I think it's like, you know, it's a mixed bag for Indiana. On the plus side, if you want to be optimistic in this stuff, as Austin alluded to, you have more opportunity and more room for Andrew Nembhard to show his growth. You have more opportunity and more room for Bennedict Mathurin to show his growth. You have more opportunity and room for Jarris Walker to get playing time, Ben Shepherd to get playing time. I think, you know, of those names that I mentioned, Ben Shepherd is not of the caliber of the previous 3 in terms of young players, young ascending players, but those guys all get increased roles and opportunities to potentially develop and hone and improve their skill sets. And if that's the case, and you get a healthy Tyrese Haliburton back for 2027, and these guys have all taken on more and they've developed more, okay, maybe we're talking. Unfortunately, the negative side of this, the flip side of this is obviously the window is fairly tight for Indiana on the whole here. If you look at kind of what they've been relying on in terms of playoff performance here, this was Pascal Siakam's age 31 season. He's going to make $49 million next year, $52 million in 2027, 2028, and then he's an unrestricted free agent in 2028, 2029. So replacing Siakam's production in a smaller market, difficult to do. You need to have assets to kind of acquire that talent and try to convince it to re-sign and stay. And so you had this like 2-year window that you were kind of looking at where the roster was sort of optimized. You know, Haliburton was going to be in his 26 and 27 seasons. Nembhard was going to be 27, 28. You just lost one of those years. TJ McConnell is age 33. He was very impactful in the playoffs. And so, you know, after a long season going to a game 7, are these guys going to be in the same, you know, position to kind of weather the storm of next season and make another potential run if they're able, you know, whenever they're able to get Haliburton back, it most likely will be the following season. And so, and you look, even then, we're now talking 2027, 2028, Haliburton's 27, Nembhard's 28, Obi Toppin's 29, Nesmith is an unrestricted free agent that year. TJ McConnell's 35 that year in the last year of his deal. Bennedict Mathurin is ascending. Jarris Walker's ascending. Ben Shepherd's ascending. Maybe Johnny Furphy turns into something. He's ascending. Maybe they hit on their draft picks. I also think we should talk about how, you know, it's a subtle and strange move before game 6 of the playoffs where they go out and they acquire their 2026 pick, so next year's pick that they did not have control of, for giving up this year's pick, which was in the 20s. And you would think, like, you're in the finals, you're a team that, you know, doesn't have any free agents leaving at the end of the year. You'd think you'd be betting on yourself to be better than a mid-20s pick this year with the team that just got you to the finals next year. And you would also think that a player to add to this year, to this next year's team in this run, would be more valuable than the 2026 pick, even though that 2026 draft is loaded. And the Pacers didn't do that. They didn't do the things that you would normally do if you're in a position of like win now with that pick and that management. And so I'm fascinated by how they weighed the risks of knowing that these calf issues, right? Like Tatum complained of calf issues before rupturing his Achilles. Damian Lillard obviously had long-standing calf issues before rupturing his Achilles. How much did they know that this was a risk? And like, I'm fascinated by that whole equation. So the Pacers now don't have the first round pick next year. In this coming draft, they have it next year. So this team, next year is in a bit of a transition year, and then hoping to start sort of add talent to the 2026 year. You wonder if it could. I think the team is too good and the East is too bad for it to be like a Spurs outcome. Remember where David Robinson gets hurt that one year, and then they end up in the lotto, and then they end up with the number 1 pick, and Tim Duncan is there. I don't think they're that bad. I don't think the East is good enough to like push them into that range. But that trade was just really suspicious to me and strange. And it looks great now, given that next year looks a little bit like a reset year or kind of a gap year for the Pacers as an organization.
Yeah, and kind of to that point, looking at the Eastern Conference odds, it's the Cavs plus 270, the Knicks plus 280, the Magic, #OurMagic, plus 500, Celtics plus 500, then a big gap to the Sixers at plus 1100. So yeah, Austin, if you want to add anything there, then like, does like the fallout here is like, okay, the Cavs probably run it back. They probably don't shake up their roster. Hey, maybe this 76ers could come back to life. This New York Knicks coaching job looks awesome now with how watered down the East is here. Any thoughts on like who's at the top along with the Cavs? Can the Magic actually put the season together? Maybe they stay healthier here. Anybody on the Eastern Conference that jumps out to you is like one of the favorites?
Yeah, yeah. Just taking a look at it, Orlando Magic was kind of a jump scare for me. Like, I do think they're good, but just seeing them as like top 5 odds to win it all next year out of both conferences felt a little surprising to me. The Knicks also felt pretty surprising to me that they are like co-favorites basically out of the East. Like, their team is good, but like we're talking about superstars that don't defend. Like, their 2 best players that they have the most invested in both don't defend, including Cat being one of the worst defensive centers in the league. Seems kind of tough to me. Like, they had a easier run this year than they had previously, and they couldn't beat the Pacers. I hate to say this, I hate to put this on any sort of record or recording, but I think Philly is maybe slight value here. As if you look at Bet Online, they're the 6th most likely team out of the East. FanDuel, they're the 5th most likely. I have said time and again that I don't think Joel Embiid is a playoff winner. I don't like their ball movement. I don't like I thought I liked Nick Nurse until he came to Philly, and I don't like what he did even with what little he had. I didn't like the habits that he was forming for that team. But you would think that Daryl Morey is going to just flip switches to increase variance, and they have enough of a core here with Maxey, and then you have Jared McCain coming back. There's no way Paul George is as bad as he was last year. They need to do a lot, but I guess the East is so wide open to me that if Cleveland blows it up or Donovan Mitchell's gone, like, I don't think Philly should be the 6th. Like, I think they have better odds than that to come back, especially if Joel Embiid comes back healthy, because he was such a shell of his former self. Those are generally my thoughts, like looking at the East on the first go. I will note, I thought that Boston might be a pretty steep price, and I would like Boston. But even though they're the 4th odds, they're still kind of like pretty close to co-favorites. Even without Tatum, I think that their core is insanely good if they were to keep it all. But those are my thoughts on my blink takes on the East odds. I don't know if you guys have thoughts.
Yeah, and I'll add Pistons plus 1,600. Interesting, I think. But yeah, Dink, any thoughts on the market prices I laid out there?
Yeah, I kept waiting for you to say the Pistons. So they were the team that I was like waiting to hear. I think they're, I don't know, closer to that tier than the prices suggested. I think there could be another big growth period for Asar Thompson, who basically had an offseason kind of ruined in terms of development with health issues last year. So, started to come on towards the second half of the season. I'm interested in the Pistons and where they can move from here. I think Austin's note on the 76ers is warranted, just given the watered down nature of the East as a whole and the talent that Daryl Morey can acquire and kind of put together. And what we saw from Jared McCain in a really short period of time last year was really, really encouraging. And then they also have the number 3 pick in this year's draft, which they can turn into very usable assets for right now as well. So they'd be a team that I'd be interested in, poking around on futures at the very beginning of pre-draft, basically. If they end up keeping that pick and selecting someone, I'd be less inclined because rookies just tend to not make a difference from a winning perspective. But if they can turn that pick into something really substantial that comes in and adds another layer, I'd be pretty intrigued as a whole.
And if they re-sign Grimes too, who's like so good, but also like a winning player. If you reduce his role back to this like low usage 3-and-D, like I don't know, he fits perfectly with like Joel Embiid and Paul George and Tyrese Maxey.
Yeah, I mean Maxey, is still going to get better as well. Embiid can't be any worse than he was. Paul George was a disaster as well, and they've got a decent amount of roster depth as well there. But yeah, one team that traded a little bit of its roster depth is we'll transition here to the Kevin Durant trade. Picking up couple decent offer. Jalen Green getting in the mix there. Dylan Brooks, and then that 10th pick there. Dink, first thoughts on this trade? We'll talk about the Miami stuff. It's hilarious to read. But yeah, what do you think of the value for this trade? Who do you think anyone quote unquote won it? I thought it was pretty cheap, honestly.
Second big trade of the offseason and second trade of the offseason where I thought, yeah, this makes sense. Like, I understand where both teams are kind of coming from here. You could say on the Phoenix side of things, like, yeah, it was really cheap, but Kevin Durant's in his late 30s. He's making over $50 million a year. Like, it's a piece that could lose value pretty quickly. And there wasn't a huge market for it. It's really hard in the new collective bargaining agreement to make these types of trades with these really high salary players, because most teams don't have high salary players that they want to get rid of, right? They want to keep those players and add the high salary player. So like, how do you like cobble up $50 million worth of contracts? Like, that starts to get more difficult. So I thought on the whole that Phoenix did okay. I think it would have been better to obviously be able to get more control of their picks back. Weren't able to do that. Jalen Green, it feels like you're paying kind of full price for, but he did make some nice strides in the second half of the season in terms of his scoring. Obviously, it was a little bit underwhelming during the playoffs against elite defenses. I think Phoenix, though, they're trying to cover themselves as if we're like sort of rebuilding on the fly. They're not trying to tear everything down with the approach that they have. So I think this is kind of like to be expected in terms of what they could get back, right? They get one first this year, a top 10 pick. They get Jalen Green, a young player that can be a part of a core or potentially move down the road. They get Dylan Brooks, who can definitely be moved down the road in terms of his contract and in terms of how he contributes to winning basketball, and you can turn that if you need to. I thought it was okay. From Houston's perspective, you perfect fit. And you had no real competition out there, right? Like, what was the real competition? In terms of the things that Phoenix was reportedly asking for from San Antonio, there was nothing that San Antonio was actually they're not giving up Castle. They're not giving up the number 2 pick. San Antonio had too high a tier of assets to give back to Phoenix. So it was like, okay, you don't have anyone to bid against. And I thought Houston did a good job of not bidding against themselves in this scenario. And their lineups are going to be very fun next year in terms of the length and the athleticism and the defense that they can add to now a half-court offensive solution in Kevin Durant that they didn't really have last year, and that ultimately took them out in the playoffs against Golden State. So I think, if you ask me who won the trade, I think it's Houston, because they were in a highly leveraged position to win the trade. Like, I think they were just in a position where they were very likely to win that trade based on who else could go out and make a good offer for Kevin Durant and what Phoenix would want. And Kevin Durant had to go from a Phoenix perspective. From Phoenix's perspective, I don't think like it's a huge loss as far as the trade goes, because I just don't think there was a huge market out there for Kevin Durant. And so I think that's indicative by the way Miami looked at this, which reportedly not including Khalil Ware, not including Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo, any of those types of pieces as offers, is a pretty strong indication that there wasn't a huge market out there for Kevin Durant. So I think Phoenix did okay, given there wasn't a big market out there for him.
Yeah, Miami not only did not include Khalil Ware, they wouldn't even put Jovic in the trade, and their offer was, let me get it really quick. They were offering basically Wiggins, Rozier, Jaime Jaquez, Haywood Highsmith, and the 20th pick. Like, what are we doing here? Like, that's all not needle moving there. But yeah, anything you want to add on? Miami is hilarious, man. Like, I can't with this team anymore. But anything you want to add there, Austin, and then we could kind of do the Western Conference power rankings, because the Rockets are pretty legit. Like Dink mentioned it. They were 22nd in half court offense. They're going to probably be maybe 15, 16. That would be awesome for them, especially with the way they rebounded the ball. Kevin Durant, no small, pretty good rebounder as well. But yeah, thoughts on where they stack up, and if you want to add anything on how hilarious Miami is.
Yeah. So I think from a positional roster fit, it's kind of clunky. Like they'll need to make some moves just because they traded their only two guys that are kind of like a 2, kind of 3. And now they just have like a billion forwards. And then you don't know if they're going to re-sign Fred. You really need either them to add more sort of like shooting guard depth and or Reed Shepherd to take a huge step forward. I do think Amen, although is the size of a 3-4, can guard 2s. So it's like not the worst fit if they were just to run this lineup tomorrow on opening night with Amen at the 2 defensively. But as far as like actual roster fit goes, I agree with Drew. This is like the perfect fit. Like Houston finally has an outlet for half court offense when they are doing nothing with their 5 non-shooters, and you can just give it to KD and generate a decent shot. And then the most important part isn't just how KD fits with the Rockets, but how the Rockets fit with KD. I'm a broken record saying how like KD's impact has been slightly overrated in this back half of his career, because his team, whether or not you want to blame it on Kevin Durant, they always lose the rebound. Like I know you said he is a good rebounder in that he rebounds the ball, but it's only because he's 6'11" and his teams don't rebound the ball. He's had a very negative impact on transition and 50-50 balls and steals and blocks and offensive, like all of these hustle stats. You go back to the end of the Warriors, then the Nets, then the Suns. His teams are always like dead last in these categories, and that's like what Houston excels at. And so like if you put KD in a spot where his one weakness is like the main strength of the rest of his team, and then his main strength is the weakness of the rest of his team, like this is just a perfect fit. He is 37, and like I don't know how much longer he's going to be a 50, 40, 90 guy, but this does seem like a really good fit. And like, can they make moves to sort of like, they can't play all of these forwards. But they have the assets to sort of make it work. And then for Phoenix, I know that there weren't a lot of good offers out there and the leverage wasn't great, but I can't say I love it. I'm a Jalen Green bear. And then on top of that, we're talking about roster fit. Like, oh my God, like Jalen Green, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal, 3 shooting guards. Like, how are they going to play them all? Are you going to trade your superstar in Devin Booker? Are you going to, like, Bradley Beal won't waive his no trade clause. And then we've already found out like Tyus Jones can't really play with another shooting guard. So one of those shooting guards, and this one also doesn't play defense and isn't particularly big. So like, I struggle to see how Phoenix is going to make this all work unless they make moves. My guess is when they say we're not trading Jalen Green, that's a leverage sort of comment. Like you're not going to trade for him as the main piece and then say like we're open for business. But like, I'm curious what you guys think. Like there's no way they can open the season with Beal, Tyus, Green, and Booker all on the same team, especially the 3 shooting guards. Like you can't trade Beal. You're probably not trading Booker. So are they trading Jalen Green?
I think so. I think that Beal could get waived and stretched as well. It's that bad. He's not getting traded. He's not going to waive that thing. But yeah, Dink, thoughts on where do the Suns go from here? I mean, this is bottom 5, but maybe Matt Ishbia will actually swap rosters now. But yeah, thoughts on where the Suns are here, and if you want to weigh in on where Houston stacks up as well.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, Tyus won't be back with the team. He's signed that like super cheap deal. So I think it's point Booker. I think you'll have Jalen Green out there. I think that'll be a decision. Jalen Green's still 23 and still going to hold some value around the league, and his contract's going to look a little bit more attractive as the cap continues to rise. Right now, he's making $33 million this coming year, $36 million the next 2 years after that. Ultimately, that's like kind of fair value for him from a regular season standpoint. Obviously, in terms of the playoffs and being a needle mover there's a lot to desire for Jalen Green, but he's just 23, could continue to grow into that role. And honestly, Phoenix isn't really close to him having those types of impactful minutes anyway. The question is, I think, is Devin Booker. He's 29. I think we've all thought of Devin Booker as young and up-and-coming superstar in this league, and we're getting closer to the 30s now on Devin Booker. he's been the face of this franchise. I think Jalen Green is sort of an insurance plan on if Devin Booker is like, hey, get me out of here. Like I'm done with this. And kind of having a player to market and kind of reset around, even though it's not the most appealing asset. And I think that in combination with like the lack of offers around is kind of what got us here. But yeah, I think, Beal, it seems like a situation that neither team is really, neither party is really that interested in continuing, except Bradley Beal wants to continue to get paid what he's getting paid. So there's not really a lot of great options in terms of moving him. This will be his age 32 season. So, I think when we're looking at this roster for Phoenix in terms of evaluating the trade, I think it's less about how the roster fits, because obviously, like the whole roster is shooting guards now. It doesn't make any sense. It's Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, Grayson Allen. Like those are their best players. They're all two guards basically, maybe a three in Dillon Brooks. So like it doesn't make any sense there. It's just like, can these assets be flippable in a way that people would be interested in giving you something that you can start to kind of rebuild through? And I think in the case of Dillon Brooks, I think that's definitely the case. In the case of Jalen Green, maybe it's the case, but he's an insurance plan on if they need to move on from Devin Booker, if that request comes. But this team is nowhere near contending, and they weren't going to be, no matter what path they kind of chose. And so if teams weren't willing to give them kind of high-end future ones for Kevin Durant, I think getting pieces that you could maybe flip into late ones later on down the road with like a Dillon Brooks and stuff like makes some sense.
Yeah, and man, last year we were like, oh, the Suns had a great offseason, and then we didn't even know that like Ryan Dunn's like a legit NBA rotation player. Iguodala had a really good run. So they had like, and it looked like, if we just told you that, like, oh, the Suns are in a good spot. Like, no, they're not. But yeah, I think we all agree that this team's just like, we're probably gonna have them on the under bets for here. But yeah, I'd agree that Booker's in a bit of a bad spot here. But yeah, anything you want to add, Austin, for where the Suns are and just this, like they have no front court depth, man. It's a complete disaster.
The only thing I would add is, do you know who they could really use? This first rounder named Tamani Kamara.
That Ayton trade of all, I mean, they've made a lot of bad trades since they brought in the Kevin Durant deal, but that Ayton trade for Nurkic that gave up Kamara as well was the one that if they had kept Ayton, they had kept Kamara, you maybe see a path with this team to be like a, middle of the road Western Conference contender because of how good Tamani's turned into and what he filled in terms of what Phoenix would have needed. But now it's just a wreck of a roster. And I think it's, for them, I think it's really like 2 more lost years. And then, you try to reset from there and see how things go. But that Beal trade, set him back a long ways.
Yeah, and I'll say on the Booker stuff, I think he wants to stay. He does a lot of stuff in the community. I always see stories about him, just investing in like playgrounds, and he's just really, a really positive impact for the Phoenix community there. So I think it's pretty unlikely that he wants to ask out of there for what it's worth. But yeah, just going back to the Rockets, they are like clearly the biggest threat to OKC. Do you agree with that, Austin? I feel pretty strongly yes, and it sounds like you agree.
I
can run down the options here. I'll just run them down for you. So OKC to win the West, OKC plus 140, Rockets plus 380, Minnesota plus 800, Lakers plus 1,000, Denver 1,100, Spurs 1,200, Warriors 1,500, Dallas plus 2,000.
I think I would have Houston 4th there, but like close. Like I think 2, 3, 4 are all pretty close for me. I'll just run quickly through my thoughts. I think Minnesota's 2 for me. I was high on Minnesota this year, and I felt like they had more knobs to turn. Like they still have like they have moves that they can make. Like sure, Conley might be gone soon, but even if like the rest of their team is young and they're deep, and I don't know that we saw like the best version of any of them necessarily. And they're well coached. And then the other one I would say is Denver. I was actually like kind of low on Denver as a team this year because I didn't think they had enough depth or shooting, and yet they like put up maybe the best fight against OKC. Like they were still really close, and they probably beat Indiana in the finals, or it's at least a really close finals. So, and that was with like a poorly constructed roster, in my opinion, and also like a transitional coaching period. Like the fact that you have the best player in the world by a lot And then not only is he the best player, but he elevates other, like, there are so many types of players in the league that can be acquired for cheap that then become elite fits around Nikola Jokic. It's just so easy to build an elite team around Jokic because of how much he elevates his teammates and how scalable he is. Like, if they just add more 3-and-D players again, there are paths. I don't think Denver, as currently constructed, is kind of like the second or third best team, but I think if we're just handicapping pre-offseason moves, I'd probably have Houston fourth there.
Okay, interesting. I'll say that I think losing to Keel Alexander Walker is going to be like, it's going to hurt a little bit there. But think where you at with where Houston fits for you?
I'd probably have Houston third with Denver second. So I think with Denver, like, I think Bruce Brown is going to be a Denver Nugget next year in place of Russell Westbrook, and like, we're running back, the core that basically won. And along the lines of all the things Austin mentioned, it was also a team that was like, Aaron Gordon was banged up, Michael Porter Jr. was banged up. Like, they were really on their last strength. So I think next year is sort of a last stand for Denver before the cap stuff gets really bad for them. And so I think that I'd rather have that team than Houston come playoff time. But Houston will be better in the regular season because they're younger, they're deeper. They'll be able to like rack up more wins during the course of the regular season. So I'd go OKC, Denver, Houston, then I'd go Minnesota. And then for me, the wild card is like, is Giannis Antetokounmpo a San Antonio Spur? If we get that scenario, then we're elevating them into this conversation as well, with a Giannis, Fox, Wembanyama type core to kind of build around. So I think San Antonio is the team that is still the wild card for me there in terms of all the assets that they have at play. If Giannis really wants to ask out, if you look at the things that would be appealing to Giannis, title contention, yes. Organization that has thrived with foreign and international players throughout their career, I think that would be appealing. A state with no state income taxes, I think that would be appealing to Giannis. I think a lot of those things would be very appealing to Giannis. And I think from the Bucks perspective, San Antonio has a lot of assets that would be compelling, and that's also sending him to the Western Conference where you don't have to worry about him in the future, as opposed to like Brooklyn or New York, other destinations that have kind of been bantered about here. So I think that's another team to be on the lookout for. And then Golden State is a team that's going to have a little bit more roster flexibility than they've had in the past, even with the Jimmy Butler acquisition. So it'll be interesting to see how they can kind of round out their roster when it's a little bit more clear the direction that they're taking, instead of this two timelines kind of split approach that they've been having. But the West is loaded, man. Like these teams are very, very good. Obviously, like Memphis took a step back in terms of the Desmond Bane trade, and so they're kind of like stepping back from the elite tier in terms of competitors. But it's going to be a lot of movement and player movement in the Western Conference that's still going to continue to reshape these rankings as we move through the offseason.
Yeah, I'll just say that, the Rockets are so deep, man. Like they didn't give up that much. They still have Tari, they still have Jabari, they obviously Amen, Şengün. Like, they're so deep, and those guys, like you said, they stay on the court a lot. So yeah, I think that they're I don't know. I think maybe I have questions about how they play in the playoffs, but I think they're really strong position to finish second here. All right. Anything else for you, Austin, before we wrap it up?
No, I think we covered all the big stuff. If this is the last pod I'm on for this NBA season, I had a lot of fun, and just love talking hoops.
Yeah, this is great. You're awesome to have on. It was super, super helpful. Love the insight, especially with all the betting stuff. That was fantastic. But yeah, Dink, anything to close us out of here?
NBA draft is right around the corner, so the offseason doesn't take much of a breather here. So we'll be getting into that and trying to start cover that, and then we'll get into our usual kind of offseason content schedule. We'll be going, most weeks, twice a week. There will be some lower volume weeks in terms of news and notes during the course of the NBA season. The summers are often a time that we can also reset a little bit. So just want to thank everybody for listening along with us during the course of this NBA season. We'll continue to cover the off season as the news and rosters change. But really appreciate everyone, whether you're listening on iTunes, Spotify. If you are, consider leaving us a rating and review. That helps get the podcast kind of into more eyes and ears, which is always our goal. And then if you're checking us out on our YouTube channel, South Run NBA, you can click like and subscribe there and continue to get more content as we try to find stuff to throw at you during the course of the off season. It'll be a short but active off season. I expect this to be one of the more active off seasons in the NBA. We've already seen it with Kevin Durant and Desmond Bane being moved. So lots to continue to listen to from us over the course of the rest of the off season.
Yeah, and we'll have more betting markets out as well, so we'll talk through some bets that come out. I've got some eyes on some OKC stuff that I've been waiting to drop that we'll talk through there. So yeah, appreciate everyone, and we'll catch you guys in the off season. Appreciate it.